And I'm Melanie Netch. As you can see, I'm a strategic lead of interdisciplinarity and impact, but my role is quite broad and includes the industrial strategy, innovation, our knowledge exchange and engagement support, along with working with our colleagues around in the international agenda as well. So quite a broad area, but focusing down for today. Right, should I go ahead? Thank you very much. Please do. So thank you very much, actually, for A, inviting me, and B, for attending, because this is something I'm actually quite excited about. I mean, I think Sharon and I both are pleased about this. This has come out of, as a result of two workshops, the Academy, the Social Sciences British Academy, and the Chartered Association of Business Schools. That we joined up together to run two sessions for learned societies, one in October and one in March, speaking about the industrial strategy and the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, to just kind of get it on our radars and get us thinking about what social science has to bring to that. And following the second meeting, Angie said she thought it would be really useful to bring the Political Studies Association together to talk about this and talk about the opportunities and the challenges, barriers, etc. within it. And I absolutely support that, because I absolutely think the Political Studies and Political Studies Association has so much to bring to this wider agenda. So I was, in conjunction with Sharon, I'm going to give a bit of the wider landscape around the industrial strategy and also the different types of funding that's available, obviously from the funder's perspective, and helping to develop some of those. But also trying to tell a little bit about what we as ESOC has been trying to do to support our community in getting prepared for around this entire business engagement agenda. So hopefully that meets your expectations of what you're going to hear today. Good, we've been well briefed. I'll start off by saying, actually, this has been a really interesting one-year journey, I think, for me around business engagement. I've worked in various parts of the ESOC. I've worked in the Science and Society and the communication side. I've been to the RCK India office, so I've represented across the research councils. I've done a secondment to the Newton Fund, so that was broader. That was all the research councils along with the academies and Met Office in the UK. And then I came back in as head of knowledge exchange. And an area I've always been interested in is around social science and business engagement, because I think it's actually our big challenge for us. We're very comfortable around the policy engagement and around third sector engagement and the public's kind of sphere, generally as a community. We often see a lot of the advantages within that. So understanding and unpicking some of the challenges for us around business engagement has been really interesting, and actually hearing what the opportunities are has vastly increased my knowledge of where we have value to bring to the entire area. So hopefully this will help stimulate your thinking around this as well. So first of all, I know this is part of the video, so people on camera who are watching this don't necessarily need to put their hands up. But has anybody here actually read the industrial strategy within that? I'm quite pleased with that. Phil skimmed it, he said. So this is hopefully a little bit helpful for you. So yes, the industrial strategy, it was published in November. I absolutely recommend that you do go through and at least read the introduction and get a feel for what it's about, because this is absolutely going to be driving the political agenda across many government departments to come for the next few years. So I don't know what I've written there. They've got 5 foundations that they have within the industrial strategy. I'll come back around productivity, and there's also 4 grand challenges that are listed. And actually, I think on last Thursday, the AI, artificial intelligence and data challenge was launched as part of that. So being aware of the grand challenges and where the hurdles are within that, I think, are also quite useful. The industrial strategy, we have 2 areas I'm going to cover in the presentation. They are also mentioned in the industrial strategy. There's a wave 3 process around funding for IFCF that I'll also cover, and I'll talk about the strengths in place funding through this presentation. So that will just, I think, raise awareness of the sort of things that are emerging as a result of the industrial strategy and the funding attached for it. But not all opportunities are directly linked to the funding as well, I'd just like to say, and explore that with you. So these are the 5 foundations: ideas, people, infrastructure, business environment, and places around the UK. These are the areas that the government is looking to invest in. I absolutely believe that social science has a role to play in understanding each of these 5 areas to do that. And I absolutely believe, especially within the place agenda, but what a good business environment means and it's local. Where do you invest in infrastructure as being an example? People and skills needed, and actually how do you bring in ideas are areas that political studies has something to bring into each of those agendas as well. So I think that's again something we can explore today if of interest. So just wanted to highlight some of the areas that are out under the industrial strategy. This is my representation of it. It's not necessarily completely accurate, but it's meant to help with a bit of an understanding as to what's going on currently in the landscape. So the industrial strategy has the 5 foundations that I've highlighted up there. Then you've got your grand challenges, and I'll come back to those a little bit more. The future of mobility, clean growth, aging society, AI and the data economy. And alongside that, just before it was launched, the science and innovation audits around the UK were conducted to find out where some of our current strengths in science area is. As part of the industrial strategy, there was something called the National Productivity Investment Fund, or as we like to call it, NPIF, was announced. Most of the NPIF money is going into infrastructure and transport funds, and that's areas around HS2 building, etc. It's all outlined in the industrial strategy. There's a research and development component to the NPIF, which has around 4.7 billion attached to it. That is subdivided into a skills area that's got a focus, the industrial strategy challenge fund money, and something called the Strands in place funding. That's sort of how that money in the R&D space is divided. Some of it's still subject to business case. So this is the areas that you'll see. This is where UKRI is really coming into space on leading a lot of this funding. And I'll again come back to what these are a little bit later on within that. But I just wanted to help you understand the funding landscape that was listed under the industrial strategy itself. The other side from the SOC that we've been able to do is secure money to 4 of our research centres as outside. It's not NPIF money, but it was money from BAYS, which is helping to provide additional support to BAYS and understanding evidence around the industrial strategy. And 4 of our centres are working on things, so it's the Enterprise Research, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, Centre for Economic Performance, and the What Works Local Economic Growth. And what they're looking at a number of different things that is actually quite useful for BAYS. So the Enterprise Research Centre, for example, is doing a survey of small businesses, which is quite helpful, and BAYS are very interested in what the outcome that's going to be. Institute for Fiscal Studies is looking at tax and implications on tax and things within how the industrial strategy is set up within the local. So some really interesting additional opportunities that we were able to secure under that. So along with the industrial strategy, and it was announced that they're expecting local governments to create local industrial strategies. That is being led by BAYS and the development of that, and I think further guidance, etc. on that is going to be coming out. I think it's really important that universities are part of this development of local industrial strategies. And I think, again, this is where social science has an absolute role to bring into that. And I would be hard-pressed to say that political studies doesn't have a key role in helping to shape those local industrial strategies. And it's really useful to know that even though it's not part of NPIF, it is something that actually universities as anchor institutions in their local areas have a very helpful role to play in shaping that agenda. And by being involved in the development of that with the local government, it will also hopefully lead to more opportunities around other funding areas that may or may not be linked to UKRI. And the other one I wanted to mention, so the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, which was formerly GCLG, is looking at how to develop its shared prosperity fund. Now that is something different to the industrial strategy. Of course, it has some links into the industrial strategy, but that's European Regional Development Funding that's going to be ending due to Brexit. And the negotiations with that, they've announced that they will be having a shared prosperity fund to be giving out across the local communities area. And understanding and helping to shape that, but also being engaged with your local will also help. I think there's opportunities to help when that money comes out, is actually how best to spend and how best to distribute that money in the local economy. I know that I'm just going to pause on that and just to see that that's clear within that as much as it can be. Okay. So we've been doing a lot of work, and I'll show a little bit more about that with our impact acceleration accounts, our doctoral training partnerships, meeting with the learning societies. This is obviously a follow-up part of that, and participating in lots of roundtables. We had some roundtables with BAYS around the industrial strategy, moving forward and bringing some academics around, experts around to help them talk about things such as, how you enable commercialization to be adopted and what the evidence is showing around things like that. So trying to be quite active in this space as we move forward. So as I said at the beginning of the presentation, I do think that business engagement has been a challenge for social science. We often do research on business, but the challenges that has been called upon for the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund is research with business and business as a partner within that. And that really became apparent to us with our National Productivity Investment Fund that we received for the skills side of it. On the positive, we absolutely were able to spend that through our impact acceleration accounts, our doctoral training partnerships by PhDs that were partnering with business, and through some of our centers that were able to look up placements and secondments for early career researchers. But we did find that there's actually a challenge and a gap for our community in really thinking about that with business. So this is an area that we want to support and develop, because I think it's a lot bigger than just the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, and there's a lot more opportunities that are beyond just the ISCF. So in order to help our communities think about this, actually a year ago, back in March 2017, we gave our impact acceleration accounts a small amount of money that we said it was linked to the ISCF to get the industrial strategy, when it was still in green paper consultation, onto the agenda of those universities. And they could use that money to either do some seed funding activities or to scope what business engagement meant for the social science or what was already happening. What we did find is small amounts of money like that was able to get the social sciences on at the agenda within the university, where maybe STEM might be the more natural place that people think about instantly with the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. But actually, by us recognizing and giving our support behind that and enabling and working with our impact acceleration accounts, it's helped them come onto that discussion in the university. We've had conferences with our IAs and doctoral training partnerships and the principal investigators from those. And again, having those discussions about what is it that they really need, what would be useful for them to continue understanding how to bring in or how to scope bringing in business collaborations and business partnerships into our PhDs and for impact acceleration accounts. And through that, what we really heard was actually we are working together, the IAs and DTPs, but we're really stretched for staff and support. There's a lot we can do, but we actually just don't have the staff and the resources to do that. So we created a business boost funding, which is eligible, which IAs must work with the doctoral training partnerships that they have for a year. And they can use that for staff resources, they can use it for activities, they can use it actually in the way that's strategically best for them to help them understand or map or scope opportunities around business engagement across the university and across the breadth of the doctoral training partnerships. And although we only fund a limited number of doctoral training partnerships, there's over 70 plus institutions involved in those DTPs. So that actually has a bit of a wider reaching goal, hopefully, of reaching universities for us and just getting it again on people's agendas and thinking about what it means. I think the key challenge that we have is understanding what value we can bring into something that doesn't sound like it is the social science type of collaboration. We've also been speaking with a lot of our key investments around that. So as part of the NPIF money that we got on skills, our centres in the first tranche were offered secondments and placements with industry to help broker those relationships where appropriate. On the other side of it, there's a self-formed group of knowledge exchange administrators across the UK who are really interested in the commercialization business engagement agenda for arts, humanities, and social science. That group has been running for now 2 years, and that's been actually a fantastic network to meet with, because those are people across the breadth of UK institutions who are working in the managerial side, who are also bringing together. Their job is to bring together users and stakeholders and the academic community. So we've been working with them to understand actually what are some of the barriers in the institutions that may face social sciences and humanities within this. And they do a lot of sharing and networking across their institutions in understanding other contract issues or where's the IP and things like that. The final bit is, as I've already mentioned, is also, I think it's absolutely critical that we engage with the learning societies, because you're the voice of your discipline, and you can understand actually the in-depth role that you can bring into this. So the one that everybody's interested in, which is the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, I'll just cover that. So wave one happened, and the list and the things that are being funded under that are already out there. For those of you interested in the creative space, the Creative Industry Clusters program, the CICP that HRC has led, that's an example of one of the wave one areas, and that happened very quickly to get going. But we're now into wave two that we're talking about. I'll touch just a little bit on wave three, and then I'll highlight the Strength in Places Fund, because I think this is one that people haven't really seen a lot of, and that there's actually a tremendous opportunity within this. So wave two of the challenges, we have things from transforming construction, data to early diagnosis and precision medicine, transforming food production, next generation services, energy revolution, healthy aging, audiences of the future, and quantum technology. And I have a separate slide that shows that each of these map onto at least one of the 4 grand challenges that is listed in the industrial strategy. Now, the key opportunity here is ESRC has been working across pretty much all of these sector challenges with our Innovate and other our RCUK colleagues, and helping to shape and the activities that are going on in these to make sure that social sciences is part of it. Jen Rubin, who's our executive chair, is our sponsor or kind of a lead champion across. Each of these has an executive chair who sort of leads on that. She's a sponsor specifically under healthy aging and next generation services. We believe that's actually where there's a tremendous potential for social science to bring. However, we've also been working very hard on the transforming construction within that. There's a lot of social science around how do people use or what sort of wanted within construction, but also supply chains and global challenges and global issues within that. Transforming food production, although that's a very comfortable BBSRC space in that. They were the ones who were saying, look, we absolutely, we've been working together for many years. There are massive social science opportunities under this as well. And if any of you follow ESRC on Twitter, you'll see the Audience of the Futures has just been announced with workshops and networking opportunities. So if you're interested in that, do check out our website quite quickly. So I think for me, those are the opportunities. There are definitely going to be a lot of opportunities for social science, because most of these, pretty much all of these, are multidisciplinary challenges that are working along with business. So it's not just an engineering or a STEM approach to it. The challenge is ESRC will not be leading most of the calls. And so, for example, Innovate UK, I know within the services, the next generation services is going to be leading a collaborative research and development call within that. We absolutely want social science to be part of those CR&D partnerships. However, ESRC is not going to be leading that. So the challenge we have is how do we get our community, who has something absolutely essential to bring to these, to these areas around the technologies and the adoption challenges that are there, to identify with maybe going to an Innovate UK scheme and be looking out for those. So that's one of the challenges we're very much thinking around, is how do we communicate that, and how do we make our presence really clear on our website where our community would tend to go. So that's for wave two, and that's activities will be happening pretty much now and throughout this year and maybe into next year, depending on how the spend profiles go and what sort of activities they have, so ongoing opportunities. Wave 3 of the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, there was Innovate led on an open call for business-led ideas for business to submit areas under the sector, and that call just closed, so they asked for expressions of interest. There's not money attached to it, it was more to understand how businesses were identifying challenges under different sector areas. And 18th of May, I believe, is the timeline they're working to actually look at the applications that have come in, maybe think about where the commonalities are between them, if there's any overarching themes, and let applicants know that their ideas are being taken forward and scoped within that. So again, wave 2 has happened, but wave 3 is another area within that. Our role within ESRC, we're waiting to see that shortlisted list that comes out. So Innovate is looking at all the applications and bringing them together and getting to a shortlist, because obviously we need a manageable amount. And we're prepped and ready to see actually, well, what's come through, what are the sector areas, and what can we bring of value to that, and how do we, is there an opportunity to bring social science into that? So wave 3, I absolutely anticipate, like wave 2, we'll have opportunities in with that. I just don't know what they are at the moment. So that's the example of where wave 1 and wave 2 are mapped under the industrial strategy grand challenges that are listed. So again, very useful document to go back to and have a look within that. So clean growth, healthy aging, future mobility and artificial intelligence, and the data economy. I think what's really important under these is to know there's going to be other funding, not just ISCF, there's other opportunities as well. So sector deals are happening under these areas as well. And within that, as this is a government grant challenges, it means being open and understanding and seeing opportunities that arise perhaps in the local context. And the final one I just wanted to raise is something called the Strength in Places Fund. So that again was announced in the industrial strategy itself. I have an ETA of May, but I'm not sure how accurate that is now because local elections are on and I think we're in a PERDA area. And since this is about local in the place, it means that we aren't able to advertise that because they're obviously with local elections. However, really interesting fund. It highlights in the industrial strategy 115 million for this. This is an Innovate UK and Research England led call again, but it's about the wider landscape. They're doing it on behalf of UKRI within this partnership. So again, it's about helping areas to build on what their existing infrastructure or things that are there, on science and innovation strengths, and develop stronger local networks. And it's about looking at productivity. That's the hook behind it. The industrial strategy is about how do we increase and support and enable productivity. So it's again looking at the local, and it's about any applications will have to evidence where the need is, where the opportunity is, and where the strengths and partnerships already exist. And it's absolutely anticipated this will be, at the very minimum, university and business partnerships, but I would argue you can't do this without your local government having at least some level of support or buy-in into this. And then you can also talk a little bit about third sector, where the opportunities are, where it may be appropriate to be bringing them in as well. As I said, it's to support areas of emerging research and development strength that are driving business clusters, and it can build on the regional economic impact that's already in existence within that. So I just wanted to flag that because this call will be coming out imminently. It will be institution-led, but for me, this is absolutely the heart of social science areas, and again, the political studies area within the local agenda is definitely something that needs to be considering this. I would absolutely say this is multidisciplinary challenges. So bringing in business schools is probably also a useful way of thinking. And I think one of the challenges that we have within this is of an opportunity, and actually a strength of social science, is that we're used to working across disciplines. So it's thinking about what other disciplines in our universities should we be bringing in on board within the social science side.
Is this only for England or is it for Scotland as well?
UK-wide.
And it goes to ASRC, because I didn't understand relevant agencies in the developed nations. So it's a local enterprise partnerships in England and relevant agencies in the developed nations? Because
the developed nations don't have local enterprise partnerships, right, okay. But it's the equivalent of what they have within the LEPs. Yes, and that's why, so the Scottish Funding Council and Wales and Northern Ireland are aware of this and working with, because Research England, formerly HEFCE, have got great strengths of working together, and it is Innovate UK going to be leading on the call, so it means that it is a UK-wide fund.
And when is the deadline?
Well, it hasn't opened yet,
okay.
So you'll see. I think they'll open, they were expecting May, but I think with the local elections, things have maybe delayed a little bit in that, but soon, imminently opening soon. So that's the areas I wanted to highlight within that. I guess what I'm interested in is actually your view. So I think, and I've been going out and saying that political study is actually within the 5 areas, the 5 foundations of industrial strategy is really important, and I've been going out and saying this. I guess what I'd be interested in hearing from you is if you think I'm correct, that there's a role for that, you can tell me I'm not, and I'm happy to retract what I'm saying, not without a fight. And then the role of the Political Studies Association itself, I think I'm interested in as well, and I think Sharon has got more thoughts on this as well. But actually, as we move into this new challenge-led way of funding within UKRI, and challenge-led to me means impact-led, which means solutions-focused, which means by inherently interdisciplinarity, because we have to be looking at a lot of these things from different aspects and different avenues within that. And I guess the question I have is, are we aware of the added value that we have to bring into these challenges that are there? And are we ourselves aware of what we have to bring to that research area if it appears to be very STEM-led? So if you're talking about precision medicine and early stage diagnostics, are we aware of what we actually have as a discipline or as social sciences to bring in, so that when our colleagues or when other disciplines are looking for partnerships, that we're able to say, actually, this is what we can bring and where equal value into that. And my one example for that is, I coincidentally was giving my colleague a lift home the other night, and she said, I was at a workshop that had a lot of multidisciplinary workshop looking at innovation in health and social care research. And they were looking at how, what sort of challenges do we have. And a couple of them came up to her and said, we need political scientists in this consortium. In this project that we're developing, we need political scientists within that. How do we find them? Who do we go to? Great. To me, that's a real positive. That's a pull. People want the studies within innovation in healthcare and challenges. I guess the challenge I have back to us is A, how do we help them find that? And B, are we aware that we have something to bring to that agenda in the first place?
Thank you very much.
Yes, before anyone arrived, I'd worked out how to work the machine. I want to stress at the beginning that this title is not because we at the Academy of Social Science think we're supposed to be coming up with lots of new ideas. We're not experts. We think the ESRC is doing an excellent job. We do want to support the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. I think simply the title, as it were, that Phil gave us, and we wanted to say, look, let's stand back a little bit and think about things. And I also want to say thank you to my colleague, Michaela Desporge, who has done a lot of the work that I'm going to be trying to talk about. So one of the things that Melanie pointed out is going back and thinking about the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund kind of prospectus, the call from last November. And the other is to, as I said, if you think about the medium term and you think about there may be particular convergences in some of the short-term calls, but thinking about what the medium term is. We at the Academy did some work, and again, I want to stress Michaela did almost all of this, but we went through ref impact case studies, wrote to learning societies about social science research that they viewed, or that some group of them viewed as both excellent and that had impact. Remember, one of the big changes, which I think is often underappreciated, is this sort of research is not supposed to just be standing back. It is supposed to, at least in a medium term, show that it matters to someone outside a journal article. And I don't say that with any hostility. I think most people who do know me know that I believe in blue skies research. I'm not trying to deform or reframe the research agenda, but I think it is important to say that is going to be a feature of all of these challenge funds. So we went through ref impact case studies, we liaised with learned societies, we liaised with different individuals, we did a little bit of searching. This is not a scientifically valid meta-analysis, that's not what we're about, but we pulled together a paper of case studies, which we will, I hope, be publishing shortly, that we felt showed important things relevant to industrial strategy as it's framed, not the commercialization agenda so much, but really important things that mattered, that had impact, that were excellent research. And if we look at them, and again, I'm aware of the social science literature about how to think about different kinds of work, but we basically divided these into kind of two things, that there were quite a lot of descriptive and or diagnostic studies that really helped people understand some of what was going on with productivity. This isn't just economists, it's also been people in international relations and that part of political science looking at, in other regimes than us. It's people in education looking at, well, why do we have a skills issue and so on. But they were studies that were diagnostic or descriptive of important issues in ways that had some impact on policy already. So we're ruling out those that might in future. And then what we might call specific social science-led interventions of one sort or another. Now, interventions or experiments that could help drive change. And we also mapped through where we thought there was more social science work than others. And actually in the case studies we found there was very little on the infrastructure issues. Not because I suspect that fully measures reality. Again, if you look at travel to work areas and all sorts of things that are relevant to thinking about infrastructure, there's no reason that couldn't include social science. We just think that's pretty specialised in the UK, and a lot of that is in consultancies and other institutes rather than being, really embedded in social science in the UK. So that's part of this is how different places and different areas of expertise are organized. But we otherwise found good coverage across all of those. Now, when we looked at the case studies, we found good, strong clusters of case studies on innovation, the kind of social characteristics that were important for innovation, quite a lot on productivity and management, and some of it business school led, but by no means all of it. Quite a bit on local and regional growth, and that went across a range of disciplines. I mean, not just economics, but if you look at planning and town planners, if you look at geographers, quite a lot on that. Some on businesses, mainly business school led, and quite a lot on skills and education, though perhaps less robust than you might like it to be. And we, again, for various reasons, it's an area that's been highly political in terms of government policies, not very many good experiments, what really matters, not much appreciation of the long-term infrastructure that's needed to, you can't just transplant one bit of an education system from one country into another and so on. But we did find, strong evidence of all of those. Not a lot of political science work, some in local government. It could be the way we went about our searches, but we did go through all the, the ref impact case studies, we did keyword searches and so on. So not a lot, and we'll come and talk to that in a moment. And not anything like enough of what we think social sciences in many disciplines could add is somehow helping to foster a climate of learning by doing, of experiment, of learning what background social contextual factors really make differences or not. Now, we call those interventions, but some of them could be natural comparisons. You've got the Northern Powerhouse versus the Manchester Industrial Strategy versus much looser and less focused areas in some other regions in England. So, do we really have a sense of in the UK? Because, again, there's a lot of international literature of this sort, looking at the social conditions for regional growth and technology transfer and dissemination of innovation, and why has the UK got such long time before its businesses take up innovations that firms in other countries pick up much more quickly, particularly small and medium-sized firms. There are lots of questions. It's not always very clear that what you find in Taiwan or the Midwest in America or Australia is going to transfer very neatly over here, and because a lot of these social contextual factors depend on the social architecture. So we think there's a big missing bit here, which is evaluations, and I don't just mean the kind that stands back and 10 years later reports, could do better, but trying to get some sense of these sorts of things may or may not be working or not. These are the sorts of things that really can make a difference to dissemination of things to small businesses. Somehow there's the assumption that all we need to do is give them a tax break and investment's going to grow as opposed, and so there's a lot of stuff going on here. So standing back from this, and again we want to be modest about what we think this means. It means there are missing bits of what can be done, and some of these reflect the skills and strengths of the UK social science community. Some of it is reflected, funding things. But right now, there's no kind of clear overarching space for some of these issues. That's not a criticism of the industrial strategy challenging its fund. It's saying, what else do we need? So we think there are, as I said, some needs here. Now, if I stand back, and I am going to stand back, and then I'm going to ask to go back to Melanie's last slide, Michaela, the last slide about learning societies. It seems to us that, as I said, I've already given what was going to be my catchphrase at this point, which is for the social sciences to really engage with the industrial strategy challenge firm challenges. We are going to have to start thinking medium term and structurally. It's no longer a case, and I say this without criticism, but as someone who was a funder for many years, you know, you could tell when some individual scholar had sat and read and said, well, how can I cram my interest into, you know, the words you're using? And that's good. You know, that's part of being agile and taking the opportunities you have. And I believe in principled opportunism, so that, you know, as long as there's a true principle underneath, as opposed to naked opportunism, you know, that's fine. But I do think what this whole challenge-led funding environment means is you've got to stand back and say, who will care beside, you know, it's not just a journal article. Am I really interested in that? You know, and if I am, what do I need to do? 2, what kind of networks and alliances do I need within my institution or between my institution and someone else? I mean, again, we've seen some examples where people say, well, actually, there aren't any economists interested in this in my university, but there are over there, and you know, we can work on something together. So I think it's going to put a premium on that, which I think has been happening anyway. I mean, Melanie may want to talk a bit about what she knows about ESRC funding for, well, Research Council funding for multidisciplinary work, but it does seem to me that's been growing in a secular sense anyway. It will mean thinking more about the social challenges that relate to STEM. I mean, I think we all know new tech, I mean, whatever we want to say about healthy aging and so on, if social science becomes relegated to those issues only, it's going to miss some of the big issues that face our country. So I think it will be about how are we going to deal with climate change post-Brexit. It's going to mean looking at what's the effect of digital technology, and it's not just ethics and it's not just regulation, it is about how it changes behavior, and that work has psychological dimensions, it has political dimensions, and it has effect on elections. I'm not saying that would fit in industrial strategy, but I just think those sorts of issues are going to rise. So what we're wanting to say, and what we're planning to do with this little paper on industrial strategy case studies, is support, you know, I think it's good that this money has come. It's important that the UK address some of its long-standing challenges. We think for social scientists to play the role they can, they're going to need to think more medium-term about building these sorts of networks, and they're going to need to talk to their institutions. And I suspect we're going to continue to get pressure to say, can you stop having a model that says if an institution puts in a bid led by, you know, its engineering firm for 50 million, that stops you putting in another bid. I mean, I think there's some demand management issues, and I've told Melanie this, you know, I just think there's some issues there about making sure we get the best social science, because it's not always the case that the best social science is in big STEM-dominated universities, but it sometimes is. So I think that's a practical issue. But we want to encourage that medium-term participation, which Mel has covered in far more detail. But we're also going to say to the ESRC, we think there's some missing pieces of this. More work on productivity and skills, which is multidisciplinary from the start, not led by education, but it's actually saying, what do we know, how do we create these routes? We think there's going to be some practical scope for some more university apprenticeships, and their social sciences ought to be a bit more involved in that, and I think there's some ways of thinking about that. So we think there's some issues there. We think there's some issues about productivity, which aren't, again, just economists or just business school. They are about what's the political frameworks wherein local governments play particular roles or whatever. And what we want to do is help the ESRC get a sense of substantively interesting questions, which they can use in thinking about their own strategic priorities, and not for showing on the website filming, please. I mean, I think a sweet spot would be if, because the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund is so big and needs to get so much out, it could actually give the ESRC some funding for some of these topics that are social science led almost by design, but that really are aimed at practical improvement. And a lot is making the case that this will help change things. Now, I don't say that's going to be easy, because I think the ESRC tried to put those arguments forward You don't have to comment, but our understanding is that she tried to put those arguments forward, and partly driven by ministers' interest, it's commercialization. I think our view is that with UKRI, with a bit more autonomy, with a sense that some of these issues, getting the skills base right, and thinking about small and medium-sized establishment, thinking about that tail of productivity, a lot of these are social science issues. They're not subject to a technical fix. So that's our medium-term aim, but in the short term, what we want to do is to say, look, there's some issues here that are missing. Now, that is really all I wanted to say, and as I said, I'd already decided to talk about my medium-term peroration, but I've given it, so I won't preach again. But I will also say, and many of you know this because I saw some of you in Cardiff, we are launching a report, and this is a kind of small piece of the puzzle, but we are launching a report on graduate opportunities in the social sciences with a kind of sub-theme of the growing importance of number and data skills. Again, the big message is employment prospects are still pretty good for social sciences. In statistical terms, there's nearly as much variation between different social sciences as there is between different STEM subjects. Some of the highest earning occupations are law and economics. Was long the case, and medicine, they're not to do with STEM. They're not wholly to do with STEM, non-STEM. That there's social value besides earning lots of money. There's teachers and social work. We make all those arguments you would want us to make. But we do say, and it has been a long-standing aim of the Campaign for Social Science, that we think part of an issue that does face university, UK social sciences is engaging with number and data skills. And again, we're not saying everybody needs to have it. We're not saying everybody needs to have the same amount. Let me be clear, this is not saying if you can't do, advanced log linear regression or, stochastic chain theory, you're not social. We're not saying those things, but what we are saying is we need more who have it. And as a subtext, we need more who have it across a range of disciplines. It does not help any of us if some issues, like education and skills, can only be analyzed by IFS, although Anna Vignoles is in an education department and is a very good thing, but it doesn't help us if other disciplines can't use those sorts of number and data. It doesn't help social science, it doesn't help society. So we'll be launching that on June 8th. Now, the reason I mention that here is because I do think a lot of these collaborations, some of them will be elite studies and how can you get regulators to change their mind and what do we know about the politics, that's fine. But I do suspect in working with a lot of our STEM colleagues, they find it easier if they at least know you kind of understand when they're talking about something that has a number in it. And I also think it helps you answer some of the questions about outcomes and impact. I'm not saying it's the total piece, but it is important in thinking about impacts and outcome. What is a big enough rise in productivity that you can say this form of intervention had an effect and so on. So again, thinking perhaps slightly longer than medium term, we're trying to say we think all disciplines need to think about this in their undergraduate teaching. We're concerned about what's happening at school level, but it kind of follows through the model that says in thinking, we think departmentally, strategically, I suspect there's going to be some sense about are these skills that somebody or more than one somebody in your department has. And again, I know the political studies has actually long had a tradition of at least some people having these who do polling or whatever, but it's good to see them, also slightly more widespread than that. So those are some thoughts from the Academy. As I said, I hope when you see some of them, like the Positive Prospects, which is the name of the report we're launching on 8th June, I hope you'll see it's appropriate, and I saw faces of relief, that we're not saying everybody has to look the same or that, but that you'll feel that it's supporting the social sciences. But part of this is thinking we are in a game where for at least the next decade or so, we've got to start thinking I think, structurally as disciplines and as social sciences, rather than how can we serve the best interests only of our individuals. And then that takes me back to the slide which Melanie put in, but it partly arises from a pre-meeting we had this morning, where we're talking about, it's not up for us to, we're not political scientists. Some of my best friends are, but I'm not. And, it means you need to think about, well, substantively, I still believe that's an important role for the learned societies, is to say, let's look ahead, what substantively are some really important issues we can cover. As I said, I've mentioned local government. I think there are going to be questions about regional government. I think there are going to be some post-Brexit questions. I was talking with Bob next to me about, if you don't have the EU defining what are relevant regions, how do we, think about regional issues? There are a whole set of issues, so there's a substantive set of issues, but we do think, and it's something, frankly, we're at the Academy failing on, and we've got to stand back and think about what we can do, is playing a more active brokerage role. I mean, there are going to be cases where people say, who can I talk to who knows about X? Well, we're not well placed to do that. Our database of our fellows doesn't really give us a scope to do that. If it's an area that someone in the office happens to know about, fine. I appreciate that bit about who's well placed is tricky, because it's who is interested in it, who knows something about it, who's really smart and does really high quality thinking about it, and who do I get on with? I mean, naturally, there's an issue there, but it is really important that we're able to think about learned societies playing a brokerage role of saying, we know some people who can talk to you, respond reasonably quickly, who care about things. And I think that means we're all going to be facing challenges for smallish organizations about how we do that brokerage. Because it won't just be the ESRC with its grants database that's called on to do this. So slightly is about this role of a learned society in playing both some intellectual leadership role and some brokerage role, as opposed to what they've long done, which is represent their members' interests and help in a more gradual way take things forward. So those are my thoughts on for what they're worth.
Thank you very much.